May 17, 2018 meeting of the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will please come to order. Mr. Attorney, do you have something for this evening?
I do, everyone. There's going to be sort of a different dynamic. Welcome to a school board meeting in 2018. We have one board member tonight who's going to be joining us. I don't know if it's Skype or I don't know what. It's through Skype. He's not with us yet, but as you can see, you know, that's not Ezio Tamburello. That's an iPad where Ezio will be speaking from at some point tonight, but he is not included yet in the quorum. Obviously, now that Mr. Sedano is here, we can get the meeting going. But again, this is a rare situation, but one that we have to comply with to the extent that a board member is out of town, but once in a while wants to participate remotely. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Here. Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meeting.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies in which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. January 10th, 2018, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office. Also on March 27th, 2018, and it was posted in the Avenel Middle School and the Board of Education Administration Building.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. This evening, we are fortunate to have Ms. Susan Bourdain with us, who has applied for the vacant board seat that was created by Mrs. Zullo's departure. Ms. Bourdain, you will be invited to make a brief statement as why you believe you should be appointed to the board, as we ask that you keep your statements under 5 minutes. Ms. Rooney will display a time card notifying you when you have 1 minute remaining. The board will then retire to closed session. Ms. Bourdain will be called into closed session for a brief question and answer session. When the board returns from closed session, we will conduct a nomination and a vote on the appointment. If the appointment is made, Ms. Bourdain will be sworn in by the business administrator and assume the seat on the board. Mr. Della Pietro, Ms. Bourdain, would you care to make a statement?
Hi, I'm Sue Bourdain. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening about why I believe I'd be a good fit to fill the vacant seat on the Woodbridge Board of Education. A little background about me. I graduated William Patterson College in 1996 with a degree in communication. I was employed at JL Media, where I was self-taught as the sole IT manager for 11 years until I had my daughter. I was integral in updating software programs and procedures used to run the business, improving productivity and morale, making people's jobs easier, made them happier and more productive. When my daughter was born, everything changed. I lost my job and found myself a stay-at-home mom. Not gonna lie, I loved it. Then at 15 months old, a gut feeling led me to have her evaluated for early intervention services. She began shortly after 2 to 3 times a week. Just before her 3rd birthday, a Woodbridge School District Child Study Team evaluated her and found her eligible for pre-K. Upon aging out of early intervention on her 3rd birthday, she was enrolled and started pre-K in the Woodbridge School District. In the 7.5 years since, I have become very involved and volunteered my time for PACE, the Woodbridge ESY. I have served on the PACE board as corresponding secretary, managing the database of parents' emails for communication throughout the year regarding PACE activities, meetings, workshops, etc. I have chaired the annual bazaar for the past 4 years, served as co-chair on the committee for the celebration of 50 years of PACE. I have chaired the annual POAC, Parents of Autistic Children Walk, for the past 5 years. I serve as a liaison between PACE and POAC. I've attended every PACE meeting with the exception of one in all that time. I try to help other parents where I can, and if I'm unable to do so, I guide them to someone who can. I was recognized by the PACE Executive Board with a Certificate of Appreciation in honor of my hard work and dedication that benefited the students of PACE in 2015. I have been honored by receiving the 2017 Volunteer of the Year Award at the PTO President's Council Dinner. I have always tried to give back to PACE for what they have given me. The support, the forever friendships, and the education I have been fortunate to gain have built the path to where we are now. I also volunteer for Buddy Ball, the special needs program in Woodbridge, including 2 years at the annual golf outing. For the past 6 years, I volunteered to be class parent in my daughter's class. I'm a small business owner and a member of the Woodbridge Chamber of Commerce. I'm eager to use my experiences and the knowledge that I have gained in special education over the past 7+ years to help shape and improve the special education in Woodbridge. While my experiences to date have been primarily in special education, I am excited to help all the students and families in town. I will do my best to help the families and staff in whichever way I can, or point them in the right direction when I cannot. I look forward to learning how I can help. I've always been a helper, and I knew that there was something more I could do. I had a difficult time figuring out which direction I would go, but knew it would have something to do with helping children, even high schoolers. When I heard that there was an available seat on the board, I had a strong pull towards it. It will be an honor and a privilege to serve my community. I look forward to becoming a part of the board and getting to know you all better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bourdain. Appreciate it. Mr. Della Pietro, will you please read the closed session statement?
In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempted from the public portion of our meeting. The discussions to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. There will also be a student residency hearing. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist.
Thank you, Mr. Della Pietro. One additional thing on the closed session statement, we'll also be interviewing Mrs. Bourdain for the vacant position on the Board of Education. Roll call, Mr. Secretary. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a motion by Mr. Della Pietro. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Molnar. I have a motion by Mr. Della Pietro, second by Mr. Molnar. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. We're tired of closed session. We'll be back in an hour. Thank you.
Good evening. The Lindcrest Chorus is made up of 45 4th and 5th graders from Lindcrest School and directed by Michelle Williams. These dedicated students rehearse once or twice a week during their recess. In chorus, the students work on score reading, beautiful tone, and musical expression. For the 3rd year, the chorus performed the national anthem at the Mets game in Citi Field this April. 2 students also participated in the CJMEA Elementary Honors Chorus earlier this month, in which Mrs. Williams conducted. Today's concert is a sample of their full program, which they will perform at the spring concert on May 30th at Colonia High School. Hope to see you all there. The chorus will start with De Colores, a beloved Spanish folk song, followed by Mary Had the Little Blues, a jazzy take on a familiar nursery rhyme. Next will be This Is Me, an empowering anthem from the movie The Greatest Showman. They will end their performance with the Star-Spangled Banner. Mrs. Williams, Lindcrest Teacher of the Year, has felt honored to work with these wonderful students and hopes you enjoy their performance.
Primavera,
Meeting will reconvene. Please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to thank School 22 for outstanding performance, and thank you, Mr. Connolly, for showing up this evening. Greatly appreciate it. And thank you to all the School 22 parents for showing support for their kids. Do I have a motion to reconvene the meeting?
So motion?
Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Del Pietro?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez? Yes. And Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Do I have any nominations for the position of board member?
Mr. President?
Yes, through the board president.
Yes, Mr. Tamburello.
I'm glad you all can hear me. I would like to nominate Ms. Sue Bourdain from Woodbridge proper for position of board member.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second?
Second?
Does the board have any other nominations for the position of board member? Seeing that there's none, does the board have any comments or questions? Will somebody make a motion to close the nominations?
So motion?
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Della Pietro. All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Secretary, please take roll call on the nomination for Ms. Bourdain.
Mr. Del Pietro?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez? Yes. Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Congratulations to our new board member, Ms. Susan Bourdain. Mr. Secretary, would you please swear in the new board member? Ms. Bourdain, do you have any family here that would like to join you? Please feel free.
Do you, Susan Bourdain, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people, so help you God?
I do.
you, Susan Bourdain, solemnly swear that you possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of a member of the Board of Education, and that you are not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19-4-1, or disqualified due to conviction of a crime or offense listed in NJS 18-12-1, and that you will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of your ability, so help you God.
I do. Thank you.
Congratulations, Ms. Bourdain. Would you be kind enough to sit next to Mr. Tamburello? Or where you would be sitting? Congratulations. Will someone make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meetings?
So motion?
Motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any additions or corrections? I have a motion by Mr. Molnar, seconded by Mr. Sedana. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Carried. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record the notice of bids received by the board.
Thank you, Mr. President. On May 15th, 2018, bid PD 19-06 for plumbing supplies and materials. May 15th, 2018, PD 1907 for lumber supplies and materials. And also May 15th, 2018, PD 19-08 electrical supplies and materials.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any communications or reports received by the board.
Mr. President, there are none at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Dr. Zaga, please state for the record the superintendent's report for the month of April 2018.
Mr. President, I have the following reports to present to the board: the student registers and the security and fire drill reports, suspension reports for elementary and secondary schools, bomb threat reports, and the reports of the attendance officers.
Thank you, Dr. Zaga. Dr. Zaga, will you please introduce our student representative this evening?
Certainly, Mr. President, it is my privilege to introduce Miles George from Woodbridge High School. Miles George is ranked number 1 in his senior class of 388 students. He has completed 4 honors courses, 12 AP courses, 4 college-level courses, and 1 dual enrollment college credit course. Miles scored a 760 in the reading section of the SAT and a perfect 800 in the math section. Miles is a member of the varsity tennis team, academic competition club, Interact Club, prom committee, audio-visual club. Miles is going to attend the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in the fall and major in biological engineering. Miles?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Zaga. At School 14, Fort Avenue, the Acting Commissioner of Education, Dr. Lamont Repoe, visited on Friday, April 27, 2018, for Autism Awareness Month. Their kindergarten orientation and grade 1 reading orientation is scheduled for June. At School 9, Port Reading Avenue, congratulations to Olivia Rajewski, Josh Rivera, and Josh Lee Arak for being selected to read their poetry at the Evening with Young Poets. Some of their 4th and 5th grade students put on a talent show under the direction of Mrs. Aquino, Mrs. Gangemi, Mrs. Malaquise, and Ms. Valk. Grades 1 through 5 have been enjoying monthly STEAM activities with their partners from another grade. Their kindergarten reading celebration will take place on Friday, May 18th. Their color run will take place on Sunday, May 20th. Registration begins at 8 a.m. and the fun run takes off at 9 a.m. The rain date will be on June 3rd. Their art show will take place on Tuesday, May 22nd from 6 to 7. The Panthers are also on Twitter at PRPanthers9. That's PRPanthers9. At Avenel Middle School, students participated in the IBM Watson Discovery Engineering Program and Rutgers Athletics Student Achievement Program. Their volleyball and cross-country teams are working hard and off to a great start. Special events at AMS included the Junior Youth and Government Day, their Hoops for Heart fundraiser, the BASF You Be the Chemist Challenge, the PTO Spring Dance, and the Walkathon, their Community Service Club Day of Giving, the Spring Concert, the NJHS Induction, an Evening with Young Poets, and the district-wide Spelling Bee. They're strengthening Their Strengthening Families program was a great success, culminating with a beautiful graduation ceremony. 8th grader Josias Pujols received a first place individual award at the 2018 NJ Fire Bowl. Noted AMS alumni Eric LeGrand visited the students earlier this month. At Woodbridge High School, the National Honor Society has hosted a St. Baldrick's head shaving event, which raised over $7,500 for childhood cancer research. They also, on May 2nd, inducted 72 new members. The Social Justice Club and International Culture Club will be hosting Peace Week for the week of May 21st, which will be filled with activities such as yoga and meditation workshops and a peace party. The Celebration of the Arts, our district's first art show, was held on May 10th at the Woodbridge Community Center and featured artwork and dance performances from WHS and JFK high schools. Christian Club members went to Heaven Helpers Food Pantry in Woodbridge on May 1st to sort and pack food for communities, families in need. The World Language Honor Societies had their induction ceremony on April 17th. 3 new members were inducted into the French Honor Society, 7 new members were inducted into the Chinese Honor Society, and 7 new members were inducted in the Spanish Honor Society. The women's choir was amazing, performing in Chinese, French, and Spanish. The recipients of the Seal by Literacy were also recognized during the ceremony. In sports, Jordan Sinelli and John Droz were recognized as GMC Scholar Athlete Award winners. Jessica Carvalho and Dominic Zacchino were also recognized as GMC Sportsmanship Award winners. Charity Daramola was named the NJSI AA Scholar Athlete Award recipient. In wrestling, Nick Nyers was 2nd District 14 Region 4 champion, all-white division, first team all-conference, first team all-GMC, second team all-area, GMC Scholar Athlete Award winner. Hunter Cavalli was recognized as 2nd District 14 all-white division, GMC, and GMC All-Star Award. Dominic Zacchino and Jaden Catalano were 2nd District 14 and all-white division. In bowling, for the boys, they were in NJSI AA State 3 Group 3, and they were in the NJSI AA Tournament of Champions. Alex Silva, Jason Belaski, James Stovkin, and John Drost were named Boys All-White Division. Of those 4, Jason Belaski and James Stovkin were named Boys All-Conference. For the girls, Megan Raimondo and Eliza Abreu were named Girls All-White Division. Eliza Abreu was also named Girls All-Conference. Thank you.
Mr. George, you are absolutely welcome to stay with us for the remainder of the evening if you so choose.
Thank you, sir, but I would like to kindly decline. I have a date tomorrow to the beach, and I would going to skip school to spend the weekend there. I am only kidding.
I applaud your honesty.
That was the first time we ever heard that answer.
I am only kidding, but I do have an AP European History exam tomorrow, and I need to study tonight.
I like the honesty. Thank you.
That's what they all say.
I'd also like to thank Mr. Lotman for standing here and supporting his student. That's a show of his character. And also I'd like to thank your parents because obviously they are outstanding parents. Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, will you make a note in the minutes that Mr. Harris is detained due to work and is going to do his best to make it to the rest of the meeting? Dr. Zager, do you have any recommendations this evening?
Mr. President, I have 26 items to present to the board.
Do I have a motion for the superintendent's agenda?
So motion?
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comment or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain? Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Policy and Planning. Mr. Sedana, would you be so kind?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following 14 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Sedana. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Della Pietro. Do I have any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
I'll be abstaining on item number 7, yes on all other items.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain? And Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes. Curriculum. Mr. Velez, would you be so kind?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. President. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, present the following 5 items. I move for adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Della Pietro. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain? And Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes. Finance and Insurance, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you everyone for allowing me to participate remotely, especially our IT guys. In any event, the Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Business Administrator, Board Secretary, presents the following 22 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 22 items.
Mr. Secretary, will you please note that Mr. Harris is in attendance?
So noted.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
I'll abstain, I just got here, I apologize. I'll catch you.
Mr. Molnar?
I'll be abstaining on item number 17, yes on all other items.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain? And Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes. Mr. Molnar, will you be so kind as to do the athletics and extracurricular agenda, please?
I am looking on my iPad here, and, okay, we got it.
Thank
The
you, sir.
Athletics and Extracurricular Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following. Tonight, I will be moving 12 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Do I have any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain? And Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes. Buildings and Ground Agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Buildings and Grounds Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following. Tonight, I will be moving 1 item.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Delapietro. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Is he there?
Mr. Tamburello?
He's there. He's there. Frozen. He's there.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain? Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
What do we do? Just put the vote down, Mr. Workman, is non-recorded.
Hey, folks, something's wrong with my audio.
Okay. We hear you now.
Mr. Tamburello, did you hear the what you're voting on?
Buildings and Grounds agenda?
The Buildings and Grounds agenda?
Moving on.
Let's move on. Not recorded, Mr. Workman.
Transportation Agenda, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Transportation Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Board Administrator, Board Secretary, present the following 7 items. I move for adoption of foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Delapietro. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello? Mr. Velez?
I'm hearing every third word. I know. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
I abstain.
And Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Cafeteria Committee. Mr. Harris, would you mind reading that, please?
Sure, absolutely. Cafeteria Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Business Administrator, present the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello? Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
I abstain.
And Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. I'd like to note that Mr. Tamburello has left the building. Personnel agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Personnel Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Director of Personnel Services, presents the following. Tonight, I will be moving 27 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
I abstain.
And Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Mr. Bush, do you have any recommendations this evening?
No, at this time, Mr. President, thank you.
Is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board? If there is, please come up. Anybody? No? Okay. Is there any new business to be brought up to the attention of the board? Okay. In keeping with our past practice, we will open this portion of the meeting up to the statements from the public. If you wish to say something, please come to the microphone. State your name and where you live.
Mr. President, Dr. Zaga, members of the board, thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Keith Elmo. I live in Colonia. I've lived there my whole life. In 1974, I was supposed to graduate JFK, but I couldn't because my mom had died when I was young. My dad was a disabled vet, so I had to go to work. And I just never went back to my senior year. I just left and went to work to help support my family. There's not a day that goes by I don't think about that stupid mistake I made. Not a day goes by. My junior year at Island Junior High, my guidance counselor, Mr. Kuhn, called me in his office one day and said, "Elmo, you'll never be anything. You're a bum, you're a punk. You're better off leaving school and just getting some menial job pumping gas and just live your life that way." Now, you could either succumb to that negativity or you could rise above it and let it drive you to be successful. I chose the latter. 2 years ago, I came before the board to ask for help on this matter because it's my lifelong goal to get my diploma. I went and got my GED a couple of years after that, but it's not the same. I went to Linden High School 2 nights a week for a month, and they gave me a GED. It's not the same. I can't equate that to a high school diploma. High school, you go to school, you take tests, you speak to the teachers. That's a high school diploma. It's not a GED. It's completely different. I've spoken to some people about this. I went and I spoke to Mr. Salento. I've spoken to Dr. Zaga about it. And it's always the same thing. You're too old. You have a GED. What's the purpose? What are you doing this for? I mean, you know, I'm a successful businessman. I have 2 companies. I have 12 men and women that work for me, for families, with families, and they all say the same thing, like, why are you doing this? What's the purpose? You know, for me, it's a passion, okay? It's a passion for me. I was never able to do that. You know, it's a choice I made, but I had to make it, and I don't regret it because it's what I had to do. If it's okay, Mr. President, I have some papers I'd like to hand out to the board that are pertinent to my request.
You can certainly give them to Ms. Rooney, and she'll make sure that we all get them.
I've always told my kids the most important thing you can do in life is get a good education. That's the basis of being successful. You've got to get a good education. My oldest son, Joe, after a 5-year tour with the Navy, just graduated honors college, summa cum laude down in Florida. He'll be attending Columbia University this fall on his way to a doctorate for European history. He'll be a professor someday. He will. My middle son, Nick, is going to be attending college this fall. He'll be getting a master's in business, and he'll take over my 2 companies someday. And my youngest daughter, Miranda, just finished her first year at Keene with a 4.0 grade average on her way to a master's in child psychology. Now, all my life, I've preached to my kids in education. You've got to get an education, because an education is knowledge. Knowledge is power, and power is absolute. Ladies and gentlemen, you have the power to help me with this request. This is the 2nd time I've come before you, and I just hope that you can listen and possibly help me out with this. I just don't want to be given a diploma. I want to work for it. I want to earn it. I want to take tests. I'd like to speak to teachers. I'd like for them to know who I am. I want to earn it. I guess I'm like old school, you know? I mean, anything I've ever gotten in my life, I've earned. So I'm not looking for you to just give this to me. I want to earn it. And I'm hoping that with your help, you'll let me do that.
I can't answer the question whether we can or can't, but I will refer it to the board attorney and have him look into it and see what the legality of it is, and we'll take it from there. I'm not sure that it's even something we can offer to you. I applaud your determination and your willingness to earn it and go back to school. I'm just not sure that it's something we can comply with. But we'll certainly look into it, and we'll get back to you with an answer.
I understand, Mr. President. I thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. President, Dr. Zaga, board members. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Mr. Treebwasser? Yeah, sir? Sir? Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
You handed Ms. Rooney something, presumably it's research. Do you know of anybody else of your, you know,
It's
I don't want
okay.
to say
Age
your,
group?
your status, your age, I
okay.
apologize. Who's done this before? Have you heard of this being done before?
You know, Mr. Harris, I see all the time in the papers and on the news where older people like me are going back and getting an education, getting a college degree, something they weren't able to attain when they were younger. And it got me thinking, you know, I mean, again, this has been a passion of mine. I regret that day not going back to school. I regret it terribly. I just want to set it right. I'm sure there is other people maybe that have done this. Maybe we just haven't heard about it. But that doesn't stop me. Just because it's never been done has never affected me in any way. So I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing it for someone else, or, you know, I mean, I'm doing it for me. And I need to do this. I need to move on. I need to get that diploma. And someday I will go back to college, and I will get a master's, and hopefully go for a doctorate. But I can't do that unless I have a high school diploma, because that's the way you do things. You don't just skip high school and go to college. You go to high school, you get your diploma, and then you move on to college. So I'm sort of stuck, and I can't do it. And now that I do have the time, and I've been afforded the luxury to have a little time to do it, That's what I need to do. I need to do this for myself, for my heart. Otherwise, it's all for nothing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, Board.
Okay. Seeing that there's no other questions or comments, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion?
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar.
President, one thing, two things.
Mr. Della Pietro, please.
I didn't make last month's meeting. I apologize for not being here, but that night we had the Valentine's dance for the kids over at School 18. I'd like to thank Albert Giussani from Royal Albert's Palace over in Ford's. Albert, heard of what happened, that they had missed their Valentine's dance, and the kids were all upset about it. Albert donated his hall. He donated the food, the DJ. From 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, the kids, they ate, they danced, they had a great time. So I want to thank Albert for his generosity, as always comes through for us. The kids had a great time. I also like to thank the two PTO mothers, Christine and Lisa. They made it all happen. Mr. Greavy, the principal, also, everything worked out well. I'd also like to thank the Firefighters Association, the Woodbridge Township Firefighters Association, IFF Local 290. Today we had the two gentlemen that were burnt in the Seton Hall fire back in 2000. It's the After the Fire program. This is the fourth time that we ran this program. It was held at Woodbridge High School. We bused the kids, the seniors in from Colonia and Kennedy High Schools. They were there most of the morning. The program, it's a documentary about what they went through on the night of January 19, 2000, when it was an arson fire that was set in the dormitory, and it killed 3 students and injured over 50 other students in the dormitory. And they came down and they talked to our seniors, and there wasn't really a dry eye in the room. We talked fire safety. After the 3rd grade, we really don't get to teach the kids. And this program was an excellent program, because most of us as parents send our kids to school, and we think that we're sending them to a safe place. In New Jersey, because of this fire, within 2 years, we got sprinkler legislation, or college dormitories have fire sprinklers in them, which makes it a lot safer for our kids. Outside of New Jersey, there's only 2 other states that require it. So as a parent, when we send our kids, to school, that's some of the things that we think about. But in New Jersey, because of this tragedy, these gentlemen now come out and they talk to the seniors, the outgoing seniors, to explain what happened. Ignoring the fire alarm, not getting out, and it cost 3 people their lives. So I'd like to thank Mr. Lotman for getting on board with this early. Like I said, it's the 4th year. I can't thank Mr. Bader enough. Him and his staff setting this up. These guys go all over the country, and it's very difficult pinning them down to a certain date. But over the last 4 years, Mr. Bader and his crew made this happen. So, Mr. Bader, I have to thank you. I can't thank you enough. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Della Pietro.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
I concur with Mr. Della Pietro. It was a very valuable experience for all the seniors today, and I really want to thank Mr. Della Pietro for facilitating this and for the generosity of the local Firemen's Union in our township. Especially on the eve of going away to college for many students. The lessons learned and the attentive nature of the students today was really impressive. Great presentation, and really look forward to being there again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? The chair will entertain a motion to...
Judge.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Mary Carafa, Woodbridge. I would just like to comment as a parent upon what Mr. Della Pietro said. My daughter, who is a special ed student at Woodbridge High, a senior, came home talking about the assembly. And when was the last time your kid came home talking about what happened in school today? So it made an impression, very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carafa. Okay, we'll try this again. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion?
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Delapietro. Meeting adjourned.